Yay. Give me a yes.
Yes.
Give me a we're recording.
We're recording.
Hi, Kate.
Hello, Dom. What a pleasure to see you.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to see your smiling face.
Well, thanks. Although, having said that, looking in these shots, I need the Botox appointment to come sooner rather than later. She's got a big hole in her head.
She's tapping her head.
But it's usually, and what I figure is that it's when I do this expression, which is like one of surprise. And I think it's from teaching, because the shit kids say, you're just like, I beg your pardon?
Let's pretend I didn't hear that.
And then it's doubled down from my dating life of going out with people and they say things and you're like, what? What do you mean?
Red flag.
Red flag. See, these are red. This is red flag wrinkles. These are red flag wrinkles.
I wonder where your green flag wrinkles would be then.
Well, this is a family podcast, as we've always said.
Sure. Every time I upload and I have to tick that box, is this appropriate for kids? No.
Nah, not really. Not a lot of what we do is appropriate for kids.
Well.
Oh my God. Dom,
good.
I'm so excited to see you, to share this story and experience with you. But no doubt we might have some...
Keep your house.
Keep your house. Keep your house. Check it out. Keep your house. Keep your house. Oh, yeah.
We should have a record, I think.
We should. A record contract, at the very least.
If people didn't know this, Kate is actually an amazing singer and musician, but we'll save that for another day.
We will. I was actually looking at my band's album just the other day, my band from back in the day. I have a legitimate CD. Which I might even upload onto Spotify.
You should.
I'll check with my bandmates and I'll let you all know. It's pretty good.
Get them royalties, Kate.
Yes.
But yes, let's get through our housekeeping nice and quick.
Okay.
As usual, folks, please go check out our social media channels on things like TikTok and Instagram. It's very easy to find. Just look for shittin.bricks.podcast.
Do
Easy.
it. Do it now. Do it. Do it.
And while you're at it, go check out our Patreon. Just for a few bucks a month, you can get access to a bunch of free content each week. We usually do a bonus episode, and you also get early access to this week's episode. So please, just a few bucks. It goes a really long way. It helps keep the lights on.
Yeah.
And this year, it's a big year of ratings and reviews, because if you didn't know, folks, ratings and reviews really help us get seen by more people. So
they do. It's true. Yeah. We wouldn't lie to you on this pod.
Ever. There goes my nose. And last but not least, this week's sky...
This week's sky is grey. It's Melbourne. It's July.
Yeah, by the way, folks, if you're in the Northern Hemisphere, you're enjoying gorgeous weather. We're suffering in the freezing cold. And
so true. We are.
The point I was trying to make is this week's BooPod Network feature podcast is Skylark Bell.
Ah, there it is.
That's where the sky came from. Melissa is one of the most talented human beings. Actually reminds me a lot of you, Catherine, in terms of like your musical ability and your creativity, and you know, you've got a podcast on your belt now as well.
That is very kind of you.
Melissa is just as talented. So original like content and storytelling every week, and it's just exceptional work. So go get lost in the very melodic tones and soothing atmospheric ASMR that is Melissa's voice.
Yes. Ba-ba-da-boopy.
Boop. All right, welcome back, Kate.
Welcome back.
Wrap up our
Keep your house.
Because you've got a story for us this week.
Oh, yeah, I do. And everyone was so worried the whole week because they're like, what is she going to do? She doesn't really seem like she's got a plan. Guess what? I didn't. But now I've come up with a whole, not just a story, but an experience. I am on school holidays, which means I'm allowed to leave my home during the day and participate in activities which are my choosing. And I don't get into trouble for it. So, because I do that at work and I get into trouble, but when I'm on school halls, I don't get into trouble. If I were to get into some serious trouble, though, maybe I would have ended up where I visited today. What a segue.
Oh my God. Did you have a excursion?
I had an excursion. I took my mummy, actually. She's my little excursion friend. Love a retired parent, because whenever you want to do something, she's like, yeah, I'll go. So I took my mummy, Carol, to Pentridge Prison in Coburg today.
Oh, what?
And I've never been. I don't often journey over that side of town, except to visit my glorious friend Jade. She's in Preston, which isn't far, but Coburg is a suburb in Victoria, just outside of the city. It's probably only about 20 minutes from the city, 20 minutes from the CBD. But I live in the east, and this is sort of north, so I don't travel out that way a heck of a lot. However, Pentridge Prison has just opened this year. So this whole experience is brand new. So it was really April this year, so it's only been open for a few months. And it had popped up on my social media, and it was like, you know, you can do tours and things. And I was like, that sounds really interesting and something that I haven't done. I haven't done like a touristy thing in a bit. So I thought, I'm going to flip and do this.
Treat yourself.
Yeah. And then I thought, well, it's perfect because I'm going on a Tuesday. We're recording on a Tuesday. I'll make my podcast episode about this. So it worked out perfectly. And I was, able to learn some cool stuff. Really specific to Australia, really specific to Victoria, New South Wales. So there are so many stories of people who had ventured in and out of Pentridge over the course of time. I'm just going to focus on 2 or 3 people today. 2 people for our main story, an extra person for our Patreon bonus. So make sure if you want to hear about that, you sign up so that you can listen to that little extra. But because we need sponsors and we want to get some cross promotion, let me give you a quick rundown on, if you're in Melbourne, how to go to Pentridge, what it costs, all of that sort of gear. So Mummy and I went. It was $35. So there's 2 tours you can do. You can do a tour of Division B or a tour of Division H. Now, the Division B was kind of the main, like one of the main areas, one of the first built, but then the H division, which was known as the Hell division, was held for like real badass people, and it was really horrendous, and it was an extra division that was constructed. So we chose the H division because the tours go for an hour and a half. So I was like, I don't know if I'm committed to 3 hours of B and H, but you can do both. It's $35 for one or $60 to go and do both of them. We had lovely Zoe as our tour guide today. She was so great and full of knowledge, and she was really friendly and answered all of my silly questions. And I was like a bit of a teacher's pet because I'd done a bit of reading before I went, and she'd be like, does anyone know what this building was for? Like why it's outside the main building? And I was like, yes, miss. That's because it was a women's prison. And she's like, yeah, that's right. Okay, moving
Zoe.
on.
I apologize on behalf of my cousin
Sorry,
Kate.
Zoe. So it was really great. And like the overall experience is amazing. So what they've done to restore this area, it's a community, like high-end shopping. There's a cinema, there's a bougie grocery store, cafes, all of that sort of stuff. And I can imagine in the summer there's a big, where that used to be the muster yard, which is a bit depressing, but is now a community courtyard area. There's an amazing brewery there, which I went for lunch. It's just a really cool place. So just for a day out, even if you don't end up doing a tour of the prison, just to be there and be on that site and to experience the amazing bluestone buildings and everything. It was really cool. So I highly recommend it for anybody who wants a day out, an afternoon out. It was really, really interesting.
Yeah, the construction of it, like when you go by it, folks, because it has the most distinctive bluestone giant, prison wall, but it's stunning. Like, think Shawshank Redemption type old.
100%.
I don't know if Gothic architecture is the correct period, and I should know because I fucking did fine art as my degree. But the structure of it is stunning, and when you're near it because you all of a sudden see that big blue wall, stone wall, and you're like, oh, holy shit, what that is. It's such an impressive example of a local council or whatever deciding not to just bulldoze everything.
Correct.
And actually retain all the beautiful stuff and pay, I think, we'll hear in a bit, respect to the history of the place and
definitely
modernize it. So
yes, and I feel like they've done a really good job, because I'm such a huge fan of really just stopping and thinking, people were here. This is not just something that you read about. Where I'm standing and where I'm walking is where these people have walked and have stood, and these things have happened in our history, and I'm there. And there's something really cool about that. But when they go over the top and modernize it, I get a bit bothered by that, because I'm like, keep the original. And they've done an exquisite job. It's one of the best examples I've ever seen of that combo of old and new.
Whenever you go to like Europe and you see those steps that have been worn down over millennia, and you're like, so many thousands, hundreds of thousands of people have stood on this point, and that's the impact of that has carved out these dents in steps or whatever. It's just, you can't not be in awe, and not that we have millennia of history in Australia.
No, that's right.
The First Nations and Indigenous people of Australia sure as hell do.
Yep, absolutely. But a little bit different to what we experienced and built. So to start my episode, I'm going to give you a real quick rundown of Pentridge and this project that they created. So 2002 to 2012 was the sale of Pentridge. So the Victorian government split Pentridge into two sites, Pentridge Coburg and Pentridge Village. In 2007, Pentridge Coburg changed hands. During this time, the old Pentridge Stockade area to the east of what's now known as Stockade Avenue is developed into housing. So there's apartment complexes and stuff, leaving the Pentridge Piazza, the old mustering yard where I was today, and the bluestone heritage buildings in need of maintenance, restoration, and reactivation. In 2013, the Shea Group purchases Pentridge Coburg with the vision and intent to reactivate the site and open up Pentridge and its heritage buildings to the local community. In 2013 was the end of J Division. So J Division was a modern addition to the prison, and that's where juvenile offenders were often held, or long-term prisoners with good behaviour records. So it was a little bit more of a cushy environment, a little bit more of a hotel vibe than a prison vibe. So for the juveniles and the longer-term good behaviour kids and men. In 2016, Pentridge opens its doors. So there was a Pentridge Open Day, and 8,000 locals visited. It was the first time that many had seen the prison since its closure. I'll get into lots of detail about dates and times of closures later. 2020, a new era at Pentridge begins. So they started the redevelopment project. They started building it. And then, now that it's open just this year for people to come and visit and experience. And it's
3 years. That's not a bad, throw in a pandemic as well, and they still managed to.
Yeah. And what they've done to it is incredible. Even looking at some of the pictures, I was explaining to Mum today, we were looking at some of the pictures of even like the foreman's house, which is now the place you go to purchase tickets and things. But even that, in the 80s, they did some like 80s renos to it. So put like a shithouse pergola on it, and kind of built in the, there was like a little porch upstairs, and they like built it in just with like shit cladding and corrugated iron and stuff. They've pulled all that down and they've restored it back to like the original 1960s, 1970s. And they've just done an amazing job. So the architecture in and of itself is something else. So even if you're just a fan of architecture, go to this place because it's so cool. I can't speak highly enough of it. Let me give you a couple of factoids about Pentridge before we dig in.
Fact me up.
Here it is. Pentridge is one of the oldest prisons in Australia. So it first opened in 1851, and the Coburg prison became one of the country's longest operating penitentiaries, only closing in 1997 after 146 years of uninterrupted operation. Throughout this time, it took over from Melbourne Jail as the state's primary metropolitan prison and housed some of the state's most notorious and violent criminals. So the reason for, and going back to them calling it the stockade, is that it was quite literally, they had like half a dozen prisoners at Melbourne Jail that they were like, these guys are dipshits. Can somebody do something? So the cops literally just marched these guys from Melbourne Jail up to Coburg, where it was a stockade. It was just where horses, like a paddock with a fence. And there was a couple of huts, and they painted the huts black, which was part of the like torturous process of shoving them in there on brutally hot Melbourne summers, and things like that. But then the prisoners were like, well, maybe we just like jump this 1.5 meter high fence and just run off. They kept doing that, and they were like, oh, I think we need something else. I think we might need some walls. Sturdy. Yeah, I think we might need something. So that was the beginning of it. It did begin, just as a stockade, as a horse yard, essentially, type prison. Another interesting fact about Pentridge is that it was once home to Ned Kelly's grave. So Ned Kelly, for those of you who aren't aware, you might not be au fait with, Australian
iconography.
Stories and iconography, yes. Now, Ned Kelly, he was born in 1885 in Victoria, and he died in 1880 in Melbourne. He is the most famous bushranger that Australia has known. That's I'm calling it. He is.
Yeah.
In 1877, Kelly shot and injured a policeman who was trying to arrest his brother Dan Kelly for horse theft. The brothers fled into the bush, where 2 other men joined them to form the Kelly Gang. The Kelly Gang's perpetration of a series of daring robberies in Victoria and the New South Wales borderland in 1878 to 1880 captured the imagination of the public. Some viewed Ned Kelly as a personification of the plight of workers set against large landowners in an economically depressed period. So Robin Hood, more or less. That's his legacy.
So hold on a sec, okay?
Yeah.
In Australia, we love to like give nicknames and things.
100%.
If what would be like the Aussie slang version of Robin Hood?
Robin Hood? Ned Kelly.
Well, yeah, that's
yeah, but for
like
him,
Robbo Hotto or Hoodsy.
Hoodsy. Oh, Hoodsy. How are you, mate? How you going? Or we like to do it where we give people nicknames that are so far beyond. Like if you're redheaded, you're Bluey. You call Blue because it's not red.
Robin Hood would be like Crow Satchel.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. Yeah. Magpie helmet. G'day, mate. There you go.
Fucking so stupid.
Oh, Magpie. It's so dumb. But everybody gets it. Like in Australia, those nicknames they're not a leap. All right, so for Ned, in June 1880, after several police shootings and robberies, the gang took possession of a Glenrowan township where they were besieged by police. Kelly was wounded and captured in the ensuing fray. His fellow gang members were killed. Later that year, he was taken to Melbourne Jail where he was hanged. Now, for those of you who are thinking, Ned Kelly, what is that? He created or had the, was it lead? I want to say it's lead, but it was
Probably.
his suit during this Glenrowan siege. He basically put on armor. So hat, like not tin. Anyway, metal, looked very cool. Original Iron Man, throwing it out there.
Absolutely.
Yeah, original Iron Man. Yeah. Now, having been executed and buried at Melbourne Jail in 1880 following the infamous Glenrowan shootout, Australia's best-known bushranger was exhumed in 1929 and moved to the Pentridge Prison Cemetery. Here, Kelly remained for 82 years before being exhumed once more in 2011. It was then that his remains were returned to his descendants, with the masked gunman ultimately being buried at a cemetery in the Victorian country town of Greta among his relatives. So that's our little Pentridge connection.
Have you ever met anyone that's related to Ned Kelly?
Maybe.
Yeah, I think.
I mean, I've been to the footy, story. So I've probably walked past someone that's related to him, no doubt. No, I haven't. Have you?
No, but I figure that sounds like such an Aussie thing to say. Be like, oh yeah,
I don't know
and
enough about Ned Kelly to. Did he have children? Did he have squids?
I believe so.
Okay, cool. Well, guess we'll find out. That's next week's episode, folks. It's written itself. Ned Kelly.
Ah, I'll do Ned Kelly for you. Give
Okay.
us a thumbs up if you think we should do Ned Kelly next week.
Yeah, that's it. Exactly. Now, for Pentridge and its grounds, they were actually architecturally designed. So this is, pretty different and impressive for a prison. But whilst few prisons are known for their garden settings, the outdoor areas of Pentridge Prison were originally designed by noted landscape architect Hugh Lineker. Yeah, Lineker.
Okay.
Yeah, who believed that landscapes and gardens contributed to a person's well-being. They do.
Wow.
Other well-known designs by Lineker throughout Victoria include Yarrabeen Park, Burnham Beaches, and the Pioneer Women's Memorial Garden in King's Domain.
Oh my God, I live right next to
You
Yarrabeen
do.
Park.
He designed it.
Wow.
Hugh. Bloody
Nice
Hugh.
job, buddy.
Good job, Hugh. Love that. All right. I super quickly have to go and turn my heater off because I'm going to die in this room because I've closed my door and I usually turn it off. I'm going to need 20 seconds.
Die.
I don't want to die. I don't want to, no, I don't want, but if I do, pop me next to Ned Kelly and Greta.
I'll sing a song for while you turn it off. Kate, we don't want you to die. We want you to live because you're pretty. And you're in the middle of telling a story, hon, and folks are going to get really upset if we stop halfway through. Boop, 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 boop. Here she is, folks.
Oh, I can't wait. I was hoping I'd catch the end of it.
No, I purposely stopped just
I
because
knew it. Okay.
now you've got something to look forward to.
Fantastic. I can't wait. Thank you for that, folks. I was starting to get a bit sweaty in my undercarriage and I knew that was going to be the bloody heater.
See,
The heater was going.
Kate would slip off her chair, she'd chip a tooth.
It'd be a disaster. My face would slowly start getting more and more red as well. All right, back to Pentridge. Now, this is an interesting fact, which I didn't know, but Pentridge Prison conducted Australia's final execution ever.
Okay. Is that a cool thing to... Yeah, well.
I think it's a great thing. I think it's a good thing. I just didn't know that it was there. Now, in 1967, inmate Ronald Ryan was executed at Pentridge after killing a prison officer, George Hodson. The fatal shooting of Hodson occurred when Ryan tried to make an unsuccessful escape from Pentridge, a crime that he was ultimately hanged for. Though Ryan was the last man to be executed at Pentridge and in Australia, the practice wasn't formally outlawed across all states and territories until 1973. In total, 11 executions occurred at Pentridge Prison throughout its 146 years of operation. So, yeah.
I don't want to have a big political conversation around the death penalty and stuff like that, but 67, that ain't too bad.
Nah, I'd agree. Now, I went into, and this was a little bit eerie, and I've put together some socials stuff. Which
scary.
I know, but I went into the hold that was used that's where they spent their last night before they were executed.
Oh, that's creepy.
Yeah, and it's essentially a cell that is like the other cells, so it's not particularly different, although it does have, it's basically split in half, so there's another, like, gate in the middle of it, so the prisoner is behind the locked gate, and then in front of the locked gate, a guard would sit so that the person couldn't kill themselves before the execution, because that would be a waste, surely. And then it's behind the locked cell door. So it's sort of a double door for them. But, yeah, very eerie. And they put a red light in there, which I thought was quite morbid. But, yeah, we'll pop a picture up. A lot of the pictures that will be on our socials, which I put into our folder, Dom, are ones that I've taken today. So it's a personal touch.
Yeah. Folks, we're getting into it. Don't you love doing a live...
It's so cool.
It's so good, Kate, right? I've done a couple when I've been traveling, right? It's so good when you actually get to take the photos.
And you've been there. And I've sort of put all this information, and I'm looking at this now, and I'm at currently page 4 of 22. And I don't know that we're going to get through all the stories based on my little ad libs, but I'm here for it. So let's party. Now, another fact about Pentridge is that it was home to an impossible escape. In 1980, Pentridge opened a maximum security ward known as Jika Jika. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. It could be Jika Jika. I'm pretty sure it's Jika Jika. I'm remembering what Zoe was telling me today. Now, it's described as a jail within a jail. So the section was made up of a series of mini units to isolate prisoners and included remote locking. So it was a bit more up to date. It was a bit more fancy and snazzy. So it had CCTV and electronic doors. Despite the then state-of-the-art security measures, 4 inmates managed to escape the escape-proof unit in 1983. Though the group were later caught and returned, Jika Jika came under further scrutiny just 4 years later in 1987 when prisoners lit a fire inside their cell, barricaded a door, and they ultimately killed 5 inmates.
Holy moly.
Yeah. Now, that cost the government over $350 million in today's money for that unit, and it was closed after 8 years of operating because they were like, maybe this isn't a good idea.
Yeah.
So that was
the flammable walls and shit.
Yeah, that's it. Also, the fact that the prisoners don't seem to be happy to be in here. They're sort of taking the piss.
Well, good on you for taking a hint, folks.
Yeah, exactly right. A $350 million whoopsie. You might recognize it from your favorite movie is my next Pentridge fact. So it has been used in a couple of movies. Can you, okay, Dom, try and, there's a couple here. There's like 2.
Okay.
There's 2 famous Australian films that use Pentridge, and one of them is to do with a previous inmate. Can you think of the 2 films?
Well, is one of them Chopper?
Correct.
Right. And then I feel like there was a movie where like a brother came out and he was friends with, no, not friends. It wasn't like The Castle or anything. Was it The Castle?
It was The Castle.
It's The Castle.
It's The Castle.
It's got Body Dude, which is my drag name. But I remember like they go to pick him up or something.
Correct.
Or send something.
Wayne Kerrigan serves time in jail. Well done. I'm so proud of you.
I am good at this.
You were killing it.
I'm shit at so much else in life. And when I'm dead, no one's going to remember me for much. But if it's anything, it's my stupid movie 90s.
Love it. 90s movie trivia. Without a shadow of a doubt. That's what we will be known for. That's what we'll have to have. Quote, I actually just rewatched the end of 7 last night because Jem J from work watched it. And I was like, I forget the ending. I haven't seen the ending in a bit. So I rewatched that. So I'm going to have What's in the Box as my headstone.
Oh, God.
Too morbid?
It's going to be, no, I'm going to have something like Kaiser Sosa. It'll be like an upside down fucking coffee cup.
The greatest trick the devil ever pulled. Yeah. Cool. Thanks everyone for joining us for our 90s movie trivia fandom.
They all love it. I looked at the stats and majority of the people that listen to Shit and Bricks are in there like, I think 40s, 50s, and anyway. So you're all with us.
You're all with us. You're all here. All right. The next little factors I have for the Pentridge Prison, yep, that's the one, is that it was home to some of Australia's most infamous criminals and gifted artists, as well as being home to gangland criminals like Mark Chopper Reed and Keith Faure. Faure? I don't know who that is. Oh, I should call Zoe. Pentridge Prison also housed some of the... She was such a cute little button. She'd be absolutely mortified to think I was speaking of it. Also housed some of the country's most violent criminals, including serial killer Peter Dupas and the mass murderers Julian Knight and Craig Minogue. No relation. Padam, padam. The jail also housed a number of men who went on to become some of Australia's most beloved and iconic artists, including poet Shelton Lee, artistic director Noel Tovey, and Indigenous actor and activist Uncle Jack Charles. Informed by his time in Pentridge, Charles later went on to become a mentor to Indigenous inmates across Victorian detention centres and prisons.
Such a cool story.
So
and it's
cool.
NAIDOC week this week, folks. Which
Maybe that's a good story to do.
absolutely.
Ooh. Okay.
Yeah.
Those are my not so quick little fun facts about Pentridge Prison. I want to talk a little bit about one of the inmates that when you go, it has the tour where you listen, the audio tour, but it's great. Yep.
Yeah. I think I've heard of it.
Is that what they are? I took a little picture of me with the cute little headphones on just to prove I was being cultured. And each of there's cells that have plaques outside the door. And if you walk into that cell, the audio will start automatically playing for whatever story is happening in there. And it sort of puts together a bit of a story of, things that happened. And it's also recordings of police officers, so people that worked there, and also inmates. So you're hearing their perspective whilst you're sitting in the cells they were in, and it's very cool. It's very, very fascinating.
Shivers.
But one of the people that I wanted to talk about, one, because I liked a lot of what he said on the audio, describing some of the acts, but then also there was one part, which I'll talk about later, but he was talking about an experience that he had with a younger inmate. I want to talk about that. Not a bad one. It was a good one. But John Killick. So John Killick was in Pentridge, and I'll tell a little bit of his story. He's written a whole bunch of books. Fascinating. The other reason I wanted to talk about John Killick is because he went in for stealing money. So it wasn't one of the most horrendous crimes. So I didn't really want to talk up any of the crims that were doing the gross things. So let me read this article a little bit about John. It was written earlier this year because he turned 81 this year. And he, talks quite openly about his sort of experiences and things. But this is from his perspective.
Happy birthday, John.
Happy birthday, John. Prodigious armed robber and expert escaper, John Killick, who turned 81 in February, he turned 81 in February, has a unique take on how to remain healthy in your latter years. Ooh. In some ways, he says, jail can preserve you. It is stressful, but it has steady hours, there's no boozing, and you're not running around. So if anyone's looking for that quick, how do I grow old, go to jail?
Sure. Let's do that.
Now, most of the police and prison officers from 4 states who chased or caged him for more than 50 years are long gone, while John has just finished his 5th book. He is heading to Melbourne in a couple of weeks. This was in Feb, when the National Trust reopens part of Pentridge Prison, where he did 6 hard years from 1966 until 1972. Those who claim modern jails are soft would do well to look at Pentridge, where giant bluestone walls hide callous brutality that resulted in angry men being released back into the community. Treat people as animals, and what do you expect to get in return? There was an interesting quote, which I've forgotten what she said, but Zoe said at the end, there was I think it was a priest that had visited the prison, and one of the quotes that he had said was, this place will turn bicycle thieves into murderers. And that's what's going to happen. Yeah. So it was interesting that they were sending people out who weren't rehabilitated. They were worse than when they went in. Now, Killick first arrived in Pentridge with a red-headed inmate who refused to say why he was there, for good reason. It was Keith Ryrie, who had abducted and murdered a 5-year-old girl. They separated the 2 prisoners, farming Ryrie into the path of a reception party of heavy crooks who kicked him until he was nearly unconscious. John goes on to say that they let the crims do it. No one liked child killers. One of the things that I liked about listening to John too is if you just imagine the most iconic Aussie slang, accent, just Aussie bloke, that's him. Now, when he was when John was transferred to the notorious H Division, which is where I went today, Killick was beaten with a baton as a welcome. I bit through my lip to stop from crying out, knowing that any noise would let inmates know that I was vulnerable. So
he stole a bit of money.
Yeah, he did. He stole a bit of money and tried to escape. So this was something that happened in H Division that was well known. So that's what they were telling us today. I was looking a little bit about it online, but this was from the tour today, was that when they would go into H Division, all of the guards would just line up like in 2 lines, and as the prisoner walked through, they would just beat the living shit out of them with their baton. That was their welcome. They're like, "Hi, come in. We're going to beat the living shit out of you and then throw you in your cell." That was their...
I just don't get how that ever was considered acceptable. It
Correct.
reminds me so much of the Stanford experiment, and it's
Yes.
like, hello.
Yeah.
Oy.
Now, John escaped custody in 3 states, first from Melbourne at the Hawthorn Court. He was facing 2 armed robbery charges. He punched one of his escorts in the belly, and then I ran down the steps. I was pretty fast then, but I got tackled by a guard. I think I was unlucky to be tackled like that in a non-rugby state. He's got the best one-liners. In 1984, while he was doing time in Brisbane's Boggo Road prison, a woman slipped him a replica pistol when he was transferred to a local hospital. This time, he was on the run for 12 months. His most ambitious and famous escape was in 1999. Now, I was with a group of people who, like my mum, and then there were some other people who were a bit older than I was. And as soon as Zoe said, John Killick, they're like, oh, yeah. They all knew about this. I had no clue. I don't know anything about him until now.
I've never heard of him either.
This is the best. This is my favourite escape ever. His most ambitious and famous escape was in 1999 when his girlfriend, Lucy Dudko, hired a helicopter from Bankstown Airport to take a joy flight over the nearby Sydney Olympic site. Once she was in the air, she pulled a gun and demanded the pilot land at Silverwater Prison to pick up Killick. They spent 45 days on the run, and it cost him a further 15 years in jail. So she goes for a joy flight, sticks up the pilot, literally flies into the prison, just hovers down on the ground. He runs over to the helicopter, dives in, and they jet off. If that's not the most... This is 1999.
You're fucking joking.
Nah, I'm dead set. It's amazing. He wrote a book about it.
How did I not hear this?
How cool is that?
That is... Come on. If I were a judge, I'd be like, dude, I'm not even going to punish you.
Have a good time. That was some Mission Impossible James Bond shit. You have the best time. Go and live on a beach, babe. Like, that was sick. I'd literally be sitting in my office. Imagine you're the foreman, like, looking out over the grounds in this job, and you're like, oh, far out.
I'd even joke. I'd be like, get to the chopper. If we're being stupid, let's just be real stupid. Folks.
Yeah. Let's go for it. Oh, how good's that as an escape? Wow. Amazing. Yeah. And that was what everyone in the tour group was remembering when they said John Killick. They're like, oh, the chopper guy. Oh, yeah. Now, John was first sent to adult prison in 1960 at age 18 for housebreaking. What?
It's a good adult start. Prison? If we have to clarify which prison.
Adult prison.
That might suggest that he may have had a little tipple and some juvenile activity.
Yeah, that's so true. That's so true. So he went to adult prison at 18 for housebreaking. In 1966, he pulled his first armed robbery to raise funds. That sounds like a Kickstarter. Like, I'm raising funds. Guys, if you can just put the money in the bag. Pew, pew.
Possible account.
He wanted to raise funds to travel to the United States to reunite with his first girlfriend, Kathy Bishop. Now,
Kathy's not going to get in a fucking helicopter and come visit you, will she?
Exactly.
Nah.
The chatty ex-inmate, this is the reporter referring to John, gets a little cagey when he's asked how many armed robberies he pulls. And John says, I've been convicted of 9, and they're the only ones I'll put my hand up for. So, just the ones I've been convicted for. That's how many I did. Now, 2 of them were in Melbourne. He went to a railway station for $20 because he was drunk. And then the Kensington Commonwealth Bank, where a teller shot him, fired shots at him because they were armed back then. In the 60s, bank tellers had guns. And he said, it just bloody missed me. He nearly got shot.
Is this Kensington, Victoria?
Yeah, Kensington Commonwealth Bank.
Oh my
so
God.
That's in Melbourne. Yeah.
I used
where you used to live. So there you go. It's famous. John Killick was there. Now, one of the reasons why John is sort of a big part of Pentridge, was that he gave, not only was being a resident, but he also gave evidence at the 1972 Board of Inquiry conducted by Kenneth Jenkinson QC into brutality and misconduct at Pentridge. The inquiry was called after prisoners rioted and held sit-in protests. So this is around that time where the Jika Jika section burned and they were doing protests, and there was a lot going on. While no prison officers were convicted of bashings, 2 were charged, but they were acquitted. Jenkinson's report resulted in the government loosening bail rules and banning punishments such as solitary confinement and dietary restrictions. So for a lot of the prisoners in H Division, they would go months on just bread and water. So they'd give them just like some slices of bread and some water, and that was it. So they were like, no, you can't do that anymore. No, you need to, especially myself, like I'm a celiac. I would have been just a bloat baby for the whole time.
Shitting all over the place.
Oh, God. I would have been in all sorts.
Here's Kate again.
She is. My poor bloated tummy would enter the room before anything else. Oh, bless. Now, in 1973, I was just working out where I was. Sorry, everyone. I really do need glasses. In 1973, the Age under-editor Graham Perkin called for Pentridge to be closed. Perkin was right, but he was 24 years early. Killick was arrested.
Just a bit out of time.
He's out of date.
Slow down.
Yeah, we'll get there. Killick was arrested in 1966 in Melbourne. This is so great. I love this line. I don't know if I'm going to get through it. Okay. He was arrested in 1966 in Melbourne, entering the Fred Astaire dance studio. So he was going to visit his girlfriend to go to the dance studio. Inside, he says, were male and female police officers masquerading as light-footed students. And John goes on to say, I knew there was a problem. The receptionist, her face was white. I went there to learn the tango, but they foxtrotted me out of there pretty quick.
I want to meet him so
I love
bad.
John. If you go to Pentridge, you can see he's got like video recordings and you can listen to his voice, but he's so great. I went there to learn the tango, but they foxtrotted me out of there pretty quick. So,
they need to do a movie of his. Of his
surely,
life.
I know.
Fuck Chopper. Do
Killick, yeah. Do the Chopper getaway. Now, in the background, after he says that, his loyal wife, Gloria, she's 82, she laughs. He had plenty of female partners in crime over the years, but Gloria was not one of them. She loved him, but not his chosen career of stealing shit. And they split during one of his many jail stints. She did take him back, though, when he was released from prison in 2014. Props to you, Gloria. During his criminal career, including 30 years inside, Killick downplayed his culpability. Sure, he was a stick-up man, but he says he would never have pulled the trigger. These days, however, he understands the trauma that he inflicted. He said, I now know that robbing banks creates psychological damage, and it is a heavy crime. I deserve to be punished, and I accept that, he adds. What still angers him was the extras, the bread and water punishment, being locked in a small cage, and being beaten with batons. In 1968, he decided to escape from Pentridge, which was a high-risk strategy considering the previous escapee, Ronald Ryan, was hanged the year before after he was convicted of murdering prison officer George Hodson. That's the one I was telling you about, was the last execution. Yeah. Killick had smuggled in a hacksaw blade, and he cut through the bars in E Wing, which was the medical wing. It is now a brewery. It's very nice. You should go there. However, the building is still there. So you can sort of, imagine he would have been upstairs. So he cut through the weak part of the door to slip out of the dormitory with 2 other prisoners. Now, the plan was to jump the guard and force him to hand over the division keys. The only issue is that they decided a good strategy was to prevent prisoners from stealing your keys. When you come to work that day as a guard, we're actually just going to lock you in E-Wing and you can stay in there without any keys or means of getting out or escape, just so that the prisoners don't take your keys. So that's what happened in this case. The patrolling officer was jumped and then Killick was looking for the keys and there wasn't any. So he's like, oh, well, this is shit. Then John goes on to say, he went for his gun, so I hit him. He fell down and I thought that I might have killed him. Killick and his two mates ran upstairs to barricade the door in the amenities area with an organ, starting a 6-hour siege. 18 carloads of police arrived. They shot out the lights, Killick says. He knew that if the prison officer had died, he was going to hang like Ryan. And he said, I considered then killing myself. While the guard had blood pouring out of his head after he was struck with a bar, the wound was superficial and he got 5 stitches and he survived and he was okay. If it had escalated, it could have ended in a riot with inmates being shot. Instead, prison governor Ian Grinley used a bullhorn to negotiate. Bellowing loud enough for every prisoner to hear, he made promises. Killick would have to do his remaining 4 years in top security H division, but any new charges would be dealt with quietly in the magistrate's jail court. So there was like a court on the property. So it's part of the administration building. That's their little magistrate's court. He kept his word, said Killick. He stepped out fearing that he was going to be killed. So he's walked out of E division thinking he'll just be shot dead. Instead, he was marched straight to the secure cell that held Ryan before he was hanged. So that red cell that I went into today. Now, one of the things that Zoe told me today that wasn't in this story was that the negotiation was actually he'd happily go to H division, providing he didn't get the shit beaten out of him as soon as he walked in, which was the general welcome of H division. So that was also part of the negotiation. And they said, yep, that's fine. No problem. One of the other things that Zoe told me today was that for shits and gigs, they walked Killick straight to the cell that Ryan was held in, locked him there all weekend, told him that the cop he had beaten had in fact died, and let him believe that he was going to be hanged when they let him out because he'd killed the cop. But the guard was fine. And the guard who had the stitches was the one that let him out on the Monday as a fun joke.
Okay, folks, just, a novel idea. If you treat people this way, maybe they're going to reoffend. So it's quite, you could make an argument, Kate, that all his reoffences are actually as a result of being mistreated in the first place.
Yep. There's a lot of two sides to every story. And I know that they're prisoners and they've done something to be there in the first place. But then treating them like animals is not a positive step forward.
That's horrid.
Yeah. And that wasn't in this article. That's just what Zoe told me today. And I believe her. So I'm adding that in.
Yeah, Zoe doesn't lie.
Zoe does not lie. Released in 1972, Killick continued to commit armed robberies, get caught, and plot escapes, culminating in the 1999 helicopter escape. Amazing. In H division, the inmates broke rocks and had tiny exercise yards that, if they existed in a modern zoo, would create public outrage. I was in one of those today. They are in fact tiny, and the breaking rocks thing was all day. They would get huge lumps of bluestone, which then they would smash with sledgehammers, and then they would smash them again, and then put all the little bits outside, which actually helped to build Sydney Road. So Sydney Road, that still exists in Coburg, was used originally using the bluestone pebbles that were broken up by the prisoners in H division.
That is...
There you go.
wild.
Aren't these cute little tidbits?
I'm living for this.
It was the best day. After a life of crime, Killick says, I know I did bad things, but he said that he had spent his latter years counselling people heading down the same track in the hope of paying back his debt.
That's how you do rehabilitation,
correct.
Folks.
Exactly right. So he's spent all the time doing that, and he believes that he thinks he's just about broken even for all the shit that he did. He has a book, his most recent one from this year, is called Outlaw. And all of the proceeds from that go to funding programs for disadvantaged youth. So he's putting his stories
more good than most people do.
Yeah, exactly. And to be at the... as I said earlier, to be at the prison and to listen to his voice tell the stories. One of the stories that I felt was quite impactful for me was that he was, in one of the yards where there was some sort of loose bricks and stuff. That was part of it. So he was able to kind of access a cell next to him. But there was a young guy that came in, and they say this on the recording, so you have to excuse my language or my profanity. But on the recording, this young guy came in, and the prisoners and the guards basically beat him up, and were just kind of calling him all sorts of slurs, asking him why he lets men fuck him, beating him up, all of that sort of stuff. So John had heard this, and then heard the guy crying next to him, the young boy, managed to remove some bricks and everything like that, found the young guy in the section next to him, grabbed onto his hand and was just like, mate, it's gonna be okay. Because the thing was that John Killick was kind of like the boss of the prison, because he had, escaped so many times and sort of had street cred.
Yeah,
and he said,
sounds very charismatic.
Yeah, for sure.
Talking about his wife, like she wanted to leave him, but she just couldn't resist. He sounds charismatic as shit.
Yeah, so he said to this young guy, he's like, how long are you here for? And the boy was like, I'm here for a week. Like, I have a week here. And then John says on the recording, I said to him, nothing's going to happen to you for this week. I'm going to talk to everybody. Nobody's going to touch you. Nobody's going to talk to you. Nobody's going to do anything. And then went on to say, he's like, it's not his fault if he's gay. Like, why should he be spoken to that way or treated that way or, and like, this is in a prison. That's what got me. It's like, that goes without saying. But it was the fact that it was in a prison, and this is a guy that was, that grew up in an era that was not supportive of this lifestyle, or that was not necessarily, comfortable with that sort of language, or would ever support a kid. This kid was like 13, 14 years old. Like, he was a baby.
Yeah.
But that was something, and I straight away was just like, I really hope John Killick didn't murder anyone. That was the point where I was like, I hope, because I like him. Like, I really like his story. Then when I found out it was financial crimes, or there's, sticking people up, he never killed anybody. Yes, he, admitted to the psychological effects, but that was something that really stuck with me. I was like, wow, he was there's a good person in there, despite all the silly decisions he makes.
Oh, absolutely.
And then he goes on to, exactly.
One or the other.
Yeah. And then he went on to say on the recording that he never saw that kid again. He doesn't know, like, what happened to him or what his name was or anything. He never saw that kid again.
Oh my God, Pentridge need to find this kid.
Right? Yeah, I know.
Like, surely
they could figure it out. Yeah, exactly right. So that's John Killick's story. And I'm trying to think if there was any other little Pentridge tidbits that I want to tell you before I sign off for our main epi and then slide into Patreon to talk about the other chopper of the prison story, which is Mark Chopper Reed, who is wildly famous here in Australia. Eric Bana played him in a film, which brought Eric Bana out of playing comedy roles into playing very serious dramatic roles, critically acclaimed. And Chopper was a resident of Pentridge as well. Are there any other?
Going to be for our brickies?
Yeah, for our brickies. I want to tell that. Or should that be a main? Like, I'm happy to save it for a main because there's a lot.
It's up to you. You are the maestro, Kate.
Why don't
there's a fucking moth coming in attacking you.
It's not a moth. It's a goddamn fucking fly from that plant that has been shitting me up the wall. And I don't know if there's one or if there's 100. Like, it just keeps on turning up.
It got real close to
I know. It was literally there. There's got to be more than one. I need to get some of that fly trap shit. All right. Here's the deal. I'm deciding right now, listeners. Next week, I'm going to do an episode on Chopper Reed.
Yes.
Yeah. So I'll do some Chop Chop, Uncle Chop Chop, but one little tidbit from Pentridge that's Chopper related, but is a little bit cool, I thought, was that in 2014, there was a ghost sighting in Chopper Reed's cell at Pentridge Prison.
Love this.
An unexplained figure has been sighted at Pentridge Prison D Division near Chopper Reed's old cell. The apparition was sighted by a tour group and described as leaning against the wall with his leg up, smoking a cigarette. When our tour guides and security guard went to investigate, he had simply vanished. However, it was the unexplained screams coming from the same cell that made worldwide news headlines. On Sunday, the 18th of May, 2014, Tour guide Jeremy Cooley from Lantern Ghost Tours was taking a group of guests through Pentridge Prison as part of Victoria's Law Week when the group heard a spine-chilling shout, "Get out!" echo through the corridors. The sound came from Chopper Reed's old cell. Jeremy assumed that one of his guests was just playing a prank, and he was disturbed when he did a head count and he found that everybody was present. The group then heard another shout, "Get the fuck out!" At this point, the group assumed that someone had snuck into the building and was hiding in one of the cells scattered over the building's 3 floors. The security guard was called and was shocked to find nobody hiding in any of the cells. Staff made the decision to call the police, who checked every room and cell in the building, but nobody was found. Chopper Reed.
Yeah, because my initial thought was someone's like come in and squatting and whatever.
Yeah. Oh, by the way, so I probably should have prefaced this. Chopper Reed died in 2013. So this was the year after.
The year after. And Chopper totally would have.
Oh, he would have done that.
If
100%.
Yeah, he would. Yeah. If Ghost Surreal, Chopper would totally come and he'd. What is it about Australia? We're just pranksters.
Like, we really are. I know.
Yeah, he would totally have done that.
Without a shadow of a doubt. All right, folks. Well, why don't you do yourself a favor and join me next week? I'll follow it up. Let's do a double. I'll do a double. Single, double. Reminds me of an exercise video. Yeah, we'll do a double. I'll do Chopper Reed next week. So join me with that, because I've also got a story about a young guy who was in Pentridge Prison who basically had Chopper as his mentor. And he tells his in-depth story about how Chopper Reed actually changed his life. And that's fascinating. So this is a cute little Melbourne, Victoria, Australia crime series.
Yeah.
Let's do it.
Why rush it? Let's spread it out.
Let's take our time. Let's take our gosh darn time.
All right. Well, Kate,
yes?
you've once again, why is it blurry? Thank you. Focus back on me. You've once again broken the wheel. You've reinvented the wheel.
I've broken the wheel. I've reinvented the mold, and here we are.
You're doing stuff we've never done before. So this is awesome. Well done.
It was so much fun. I had such a good day, and I want to do more of those things because there's more from my experience of going there than reading anything on the internet has given me. So I highly recommend. So if you're in Melbourne and it's still school holes and you've got some little chippies, you can take them as well. You just have to be, they give you all the warnings of all the things that are on all of the buildings and the stuff that's said on the recording. So if you don't want them to hear that, then that's okay. But I also think that there's a huge part about education that is very important for our youth. So take them along.
Agreed. And people that have got convictions have every damn right, if not more, to be given opportunity.
Correct. Unless they killed a 5-year-old girl. He didn't do well after that.
All right. Thanks,
cool.
folks.
On that note, bye, guys.
Hope
we
you
love
have a good night.
Stay out of prison.